Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this week's edition of our chat on The Investigation Continues, which is our WTOP podcast about the disappearance of the Lyon sisters. I'm Neil Augenstein. You can probably tell from the background that we are not in the WTOP studios. We're actually coming to you live from Florida. Taking a few minutes from family vacation to catch up with you folks. It's a big week on the podcast. There was we'll get to it. Sorry, let me just change that to try to deal with a little bit of the glare. But right now, and I'm sorry, let me just make sure that I'm able to see the podcast on my iPad too. Anyway, so this week in the podcast, we're talking about a big change in the search for the Lyon sisters who disappeared March 25th, 1975. In episode 4, after almost 4 decades, a person is indicted for the Lyon sisters' murders, even though their bodies were not have not been recovered. So let me give you a little background. In February of 2014, Montgomery County Police held a news conference, and they announced that they did have a person of interest in the case, and his name was Lloyd Lee Welch. Lloyd Lee Welch was a guy who lived in Maryland at the time that the Lyon sisters disappeared. He lived nearby in Hyattsville, and what police say what police said in February of 2014 was that police were able to identify that Welch had been at Wheaton Plaza Mall the day that the Lyon sisters disappeared. The police chief Tom Manger said that he even had some contact with the Lyon sisters. He wasn't specific in that news conference, but we've learned more since then. They said that in the time that police, when police finally realized that Lloyd Lee Welch was their suspect, they realized that he was in jail in Delaware, serving a 29-year sentence for sexually abusing another little girl. And so there was that. There were a couple of other incidents across the country, and police realized that man Welch was the person who was their suspect. On the day that police announced that Lloyd Lee Welch was the suspect, or was the person of interest in the murders of the Lyon sisters, they displayed a sketch. This was a sketch of a man with long hair. He was 18 or 20 years old. He had a mustache. He had acne. He had scars on his left cheek. And police displayed it side by side with a mugshot, a Montgomery County, Maryland mugshot of Lloyd Welch that was taken after an arrest for burglary in Montgomery County 2 years later in 1977. And there was a more than striking resemblance between the sketch that police had presented as well as the mugshot of Lloyd Lee Welch. What police didn't disclose that day was that the sketch that was generated 2 days after the Lyon sisters disappeared. There was a little 13-year-old girl who we referred to in the podcast as Darlene, who described a man talking to the Lyon sisters. Darlene described him as being too close. She described him as creepy. She said that she didn't say anything to the girls, but she said to the man, "Why don't you take a picture? It'll last longer." And police now believed that the man who was pictured in that sketch was Lloyd Lee Welch. Now, police had not made that sketch generated from the information that Darlene provided public until almost 40 years later. They had not made it public. They had not told the public that this was the person that they were looking for. And they didn't even describe that there was an 18 or 20-year-old guy who police thought was leering at the girls. So that was certainly a missed opportunity for Montgomery County Police. And to this day, I haven't had a chance to talk with them about the decision making in not making that sketch public, because there is a gag order in place in the case, and that won't come out until trial or perhaps after that. There was one other turn in that case that was related to the sketch. The sketch that police had made public was of a man in his 50s, good-looking, short-haired guy who came to be known as Tape Recorder Man. And I'm sorry that some folks are reporting no sound. There is sound. You might have to turn up your computer a little bit, because the level might be a little bit lower than is comfortable. But there is sound coming, and I hope that if you can turn up your speaker, perhaps you can hear it a little bit better. So after police had not revealed that sketch to the public of the man who Darlene said that she had seen, but they had released the sketch of Tape Recorder Man. So Tape Recorder Man was the person who people were looking for. Now, the day after police released the sketch of Tape Recorder Man, a man who lived nearby came to Wheaton Plaza and told a security guard that he had been there the day the Lyon sisters disappeared, and that this man had witnessed them talking to a man who matched the description of Tape Recorder Man. And he even said that he saw these girls leaving with the person who has come to be known as Tape Recorder Man. So this was obviously an important lead for police. What we found out 40 years later was that man who came to Wheaton Plaza and told the security guard that he had seen the girls leaving with Tape Recorder Man. That Good Samaritan was Lloyd Lee Welch. Right, he had come to Wheaton Plaza Mall the day after police had released a sketch of somebody who looked completely different than Welch looked, and he had sort of told police, yes, you're on the right track. I saw the girls leaving with Tape Recorder Man. But police did give that man a lie detector test, and he failed it. So police figured, well, he's just trying to get the $9,000 reward, which is out there for help in solving the Lyon sisters case. But police, for some reason, apparently didn't take note of the fact that Welch might be somehow related to the disappearance of the girls. And they had not only had they not made the sketch public to people out there, they also had not apparently spread the information within the police department. So 2 years later, when Lloyd Lee Welch was arrested for burglary, uh, if they had that sketch handy, they might have noticed the similarities, and there might have been an arrest in connection with the Lyon sisters case 2 years after they disappeared, rather than almost 40 years after they disappeared. So that was certainly a missed opportunity. Let me do something now, since a lot of people say that they're not able to hear. I'm going to change the audio here. And you should be able to hear me considerably louder now. There is no microphone plugged in, so I'm using the built-in microphone of the iPhone. Are you able to hear me a little bit better now, ladies, Dolly and Patty? Let's hope that you can hear a little bit better now. So that's essentially where we are on the podcast. I will tell you that about a year and a half after Lloyd Lee Welch was named the person of interest in the Lyon sisters' disappearance, he was indicted, and he is now going to stand trial for their murders. It will begin in September in Bedford County, Virginia, where investigators believe that that's where the Lyon sisters' bodies were brought and disposed of on Taylor's Mountain, which is a very remote, beautiful mountain in Bedford County, Virginia, where some Welch family members had homes, and according to investigators, they believe that the bodies of the Lyon sisters were disposed of there on their property. Looking forward to next week's episode, which will be the 5th and final episode of The Investigation Continues. We'll get into what police and prosecutors say is a conspiracy to cover up information about the Lyon sisters case. There have been several persons of interest who have been named a couple of years ago in connection with the case, but police have made no other arrests in connection with the murders, and it's not clear whether they ever will. So we will be getting to those specifics in next week's episode. Let me just take a look here and see if I'm able to see any questions that any of you may have. I see them here. Okay. Dolly, I see you asking, is Richard Welch still a person of interest? The answer is officially yes. He is still a person of interest. Although there's been no indication that police have moved any closer to charging him. What police have said back in 2015, when they announced the indictment of Lloyd Lee Welch, they said that Richard Welch, who was Lloyd Lee Welch's uncle, they said that Richard Welch had allegedly sexually abused one of the girls in his home in Hyattsville in the days after the girls disappeared. Police have not provided much more information about that. Welch's daughter, Patty Welch, has repeatedly denied he had any information about that. She believes that Lloyd Lee Welch is trying to bring somebody else down with him in his murder case. And police have not, as I said, charged anybody else, and it's unclear whether they will be. The question is, any idea on how many other child victims might be connected to Lloyd Welch in the intervening years? Well, that's what police. That's the way police believe, or came to the conclusion that Lloyd Welch was their person of interest. There were several girls, maybe 8 or 9. There are several incidents over the years that police have information about. They would not be able to use it in trial against Lloyd Lee Welch, but they could only use it if he were convicted and sentenced, because he's not charged in those particular crimes. But there are people who Lloyd Lee Welch, for instance, the girl who was sexually assaulted in Delaware, who Lloyd Lee Welch is still serving time for. In theory, that girl, who's now a woman, could testify against Welch if he were convicted and were sentenced. So there now are several women who are lined up and willing to testify against Lloyd Lee Welch if he's convicted and if he's sentenced for the murders. Now, remember that Lloyd Lee Welch could face the death penalty in this case. Virginia prosecutors have not said for sure that they would seek it, but he would be eligible for the death penalty, or he could be eligible for the death penalty if he's found guilty in the Lyon sisters' murders. Just to review some of the comments here. Tamara asked, "Do I have a copy of the police drawing that was made days after the murders?" Yes, that sketch has been published on several times. We've tweeted it. I'll tweet it again. And there's actually a pretty dramatic side by side of Lloyd Lee Welch, the mugshot, right next to the sketch that was captured 2 days after the girls disappeared. And we'll tweet that again in just a little bit, and you'll see the similarities there. There's also the sketch of Tape Recorder Man, which was the image that people were looking for 40 years, and that person has no similarities, bears no at least visual similarities to the sketch of the person who looks like Lloyd Lee Welch, which came out 40 years after the girls disappeared. So the trial begins in September. It's not clear what evidence, if any, police have to physically link the disappearance of the Lyon sisters to Lloyd Lee Welch. He has told several stories during his interviews with detectives, and he has gone as far as saying he witnessed the girls being murdered. At least as far as I know, he has not admitted being involved in their murders. What police are planning on doing, or what prosecutors are planning on doing, they did find a tooth on Taylor's Mountain. They have not disclosed whether they believe that the tooth belongs to Sheila or Catherine Lyon. And police are also going to be having an expert witness by the name of, who is a bones expert, who, in theory, police and prosecutors could present evidence at trial of bones that were recovered on Taylor's Mountain, with the thought that that it was one of the Lyon sisters. I see that Patty and others are discussing the possibility of a plea bargain. I think that would make perfect sense in a case like this. But I know that in one of his last interviews, at least ones that were disclosed in court records, Welch said that his information, his knowledge of what happened to the girls, was his ace in the hole, which is a term to suggest that he could be holding that information until he gets a plea bargain deal that he is satisfied with. But if that doesn't happen, the trial is scheduled to start in September. Of course, we will be there, and we will bring you up to date on what happens in the trial. I hope that by now you've subscribed to the Investigation Continues podcast. That way, when there are any new developments in the case, we will do a new podcast episode after the one that airs next week, after the final episode, episode 5. And then when there are any developments in the case, you'll get a notification that there is an update, and we'll be able to provide that information to you as we get it. If you have any questions that you'd like to leave, please do so in the Facebook Live comments section. And when this broadcast is over, I'll answer your comments there. I would like to thank you very much for being a part of these Tuesday noon discussions. Gives us a chance to review some of the stuff that's happened in the podcast and in the case, and we're able to take some questions that we may not address in the podcast, but I know which are of interest to you who are following the case closely. I think that'll just about do it for this week's chat. Please again leave any questions that you may have in the comment section there, and I'll get back to them. If you missed the audio at the beginning of the podcast, you can go back and listen to it there. You may have to turn your computer up a little bit to hear it at the beginning, but I think that it should all be there for you. If you have any questions, you can always tweet them at Augenstein WTOP, which is my Twitter account. I thank you very much for joining us, being a part of it, and we'll see you next week. Thanks, everybody.